sounded like Bert Leclos there. Went unbelievable. All right, well, I mean, the news that the whole world is talking about and that no one can ignore this morning, and I think for good reason, is the death yesterday of Queen Elizabeth II, who really has been witness to 70 years of unbelievable change on the planet, and I think did a singularly good job of stewarding us into a new century and of helping people who wanted to maintain some foothold on tradition and on the past, helping those people to deal with an uncertain future. And there are things about tradition and history which make that kind of role especially important. And to people who don't understand that because they perhaps don't have a care or appreciation for tradition and history, well, for those people, it's all of the things that you will see in the next few months as a result of this one woman's death will seem ridiculous and will seem outrageous and will seem unnecessary and archaic and silly. I have to tell you that there is a part of me that thinks monarchy is ridiculous. If you examine it on its face and with regard to, how systems of government have improved over the years and how we've become better at managing realms and countries and sovereignties, then it does look silly. But there is something also, an equal part of me, which clings to tradition, has a respect for history, realizes that the answers that we think we are now so good at providing will look equally stupid to generations that come after us. And the only way that we will maintain any kind of dignity, if the future is to look back on us kindly and generously, is if we are equally respectful and equally generous to that which came before us. There is always a place in this world for people who honor tradition, people who create and maintain and carry culture forward. And the British monarchy is one of the few surviving institutions in the world, and there really are only a few of them, that can harken back to 1,000 years or more of history and can claim and can lay claim to stories that are so intricate and interwoven that not even a Tolkien or a J.K. Rowling could write them. In fact, they are the basis so often of how we explore the past, how we try to contrive a future. And it is sad. I personally can't tell you that I'm emotionally devastated by the death of the Queen. I think that is something that perhaps her closest family can say with confidence and honesty and sincerity. But I still feel that we finally said goodbye to an extraordinary generation, a generation that guided us through an enormous and devastating and globe-changing, history-writing war, the Second World War, and what the Queen and her parents managed to do for a nation which was at that stage still a world superpower was nothing short of heroic. And yes, a lot of people say, well, standing on a balcony and waving is not heroic. Well, you know what? The people who grew up around the Queen and the people of her generation would beg to differ. And I always say, just like I do to anyone who has, modern ideas, don't look back and criticize people who came before you because you think that they're backward and archaic and silly. Unless you're absolutely sure that what you're doing isn't going to look archaic and stupid and silly when people in 100 years from now look at us. It's sort of like when you walk into someone's house and everything's very modern. It can look very nice. It can be very stylish. It can be very en vogue. It can be very impressive. It can be up to date and innovative and very clever and expensive even. That can be impressive to people. But if you walk into someone's house and you see a cabinet that is been in the possession of that family for 400 years, or you see a threadbare carpet that was once walked over by, great statesmen of the 1700s, then I think there's a level of basic humility and respect that should kick in, unless you're the kind of person who really has no respect for any institutions. And we can see those people all over the world today. It's not hard to find them. They're usually terrific underachievers of their own, by their own measure, by the measure of everyone around them. And they're not the kind of people who have respect for anything, including themselves, usually. I'm paying as little attention as I possibly can to the attention-seeking sort of people who will use the death of anybody to make it about them, and will try to gather for themselves as much of the spotlight as they possibly can in a moment of triumph or tragedy. And there are lots of those people on the internet these days. We have to see them more than we might have when they were just on the street hollering from a soapbox on the corner of two roads with a cup jingling and jangling some coins and hoping for some attention. And now we have to hear them and see them on the internet. So I'm not going to give them much more attention than in that sentence I just completed. But I do think that the death of the Queen is symbolic, and it is the end of an era, and a mighty tree has fallen. And that tree is not just a person, it is tradition, and it is history, and it is now the job of the succeeding generation to continue that. So we'll see what happens. But to pretend that this doesn't mean anything makes you a very, very silly, very vacuous, very suspicious person. Anyway, I mean, I'd love to hear what you think of this. I'd like to talk about this rather than monologue about it for another 10 minutes. So if you have anything to say, you could drop us a comment. Also got some voice notes. And in fact, I'm going to start off with a voice note. Pretty much had my say about the Queen, but we can talk about that some more if you'd like to. Listen to this quickly.
Gareth, how's it? Greetings from South Sudan. Just want to let you guys know that I was listening to you, Gareth, and Lepang and Flax ranting about how we're going to chow cockroaches in 2030. We're going to almost sunk a Land Cruiser in a sinkhole, not the cool roads there in South Sudan. But honestly, guys, you guys really make this shithole country a lot more bearable. And keep up the good work. Ben, if you're on today, you're flipping good oak. I really, really miss Wednesdays with you and Gord. Hashtag Decimal Dan. Like you guys, Francois.
Nice. Thank you, Francois. Ben will be back a little bit later on from 6:30. Gord joining us at 7:00. So exciting things. Sean says, I hope Apple doesn't call the iPhone 14 the Queen Elizabeth edition. God, I'm seeing such funny memes about the new Apple iPhone. It's kind of ridiculous. They just changed the color, really. Some of the comments on the socials have been vile, really vile. Zero respect, not just the institution, but for a woman, a remarkable woman. Well, it shows you that all of the people who say those things actually don't care about women at all. Because here's a woman who, by an accident of birth, sure, achieved things and presided over things and oversaw and took part in every global event at the highest level for the last 70 years. And there'll be some left-wing feminist who'll say, oh, no, she's just a, dinosaur of an old colonial era, blah, blah, blah. They'll give her no credit for being a woman in a very much man's job. She's just disregarded as an inconvenient accident, much like they'll regard, all three British prime ministers who are female have been conservative, which just doesn't suit the people on the left. So they just pretend they're not there. Nobody took Margaret Thatcher seriously for the same reasons. Though I hasten to add, the Queen has never been political, which in today's day and age is probably the rarest and most precious and most valuable thing any human could be, is apolitical. And she's maintained that for 70 years on the job. We've never known what the Queen really thought politically. We've never had an inkling of how she might vote if she were allowed to vote. Talk about the franchise being universal. I mean, you can say many things, but you can't claim that the Queen ever got to cast a vote in an election, and she didn't. Certainly not while she was Queen. And we never knew anything about her opinions on things, something which is now garden variety on the internet. So, I'm always sad when one hears of a family who lost their mother or grandmother, and this family will be scrutinized in their grief that is so very hard. Well, it won't be the first time for them, and it won't be the last. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how people react to what happens now, because this hasn't happened for 70 years. And we're going to see sometime next year, probably in the summer next year, a coronation. I mean, if you think that the royal ceremonies and pageantry and pomp and circumstance of a jubilee is an impressive thing, and if you think that harkens back with carriages and marching soldiers and that sort of thing to an earlier era, well, you have no idea. The coronation ceremony, which we're going to see, is 1,000 years old, and some of the rituals there have not been changed since the time of Norman the Conqueror, since the time of King Charlemagne. These are things which are truly ancient. And like Chesterton once said, the great G.K. Chesterton, he suspects always as ignorant the man who breaks down a fence without asking first why it was put there. And this is true for things like monarchy. You can say, as Churchill said, that democracy is the best of a bunch of terrible systems. And I paraphrase him there. But you cannot disregard the fact that Britain has been one of the most stable countries in the whole modern world for at least the last 200 years, since before the Industrial Revolution even, because it has had this interesting mix of hereditary monarchy and constitutional democracy. You can criticize it, but show me a better system. And the US system is possibly, from the point of view of pure efficiency and checks and balances, the only one that you could regard as superior. And remember, when you quote countries like Canada or Australia or New Zealand or perhaps Jamaica or any others, you have to remember that the Queen is also head of state of those. Well, now she isn't. King Charles III is. But, to throw all of that out, to say, oh, well, it's stupid, then I have to ask who you think you are to say that that's stupid when your own CV can't really measure up. And I say that with confidence. Very few living human beings who have a CV that can measure up. Indeed, a large tree has fallen. I work for a large company in the UK, so I'm hearing now how much people are affected, and we as South Africa need to show our respect. Well, you don't have to show your respect, but you can shut up if you don't want to be respectful. I've never had a huge amount of respect for the dead. And I'm the first to admit that last night I was already sending, sort of jokey things to family. I'm not going to put that stuff out on the show now, but in a few days, I'll probably start joking about it too. There are already people saying, oh, wow, she wasn't, like the dinosaurs here forever. There are lots of funny things you could remark about the Queen here, and I'm happy to share those things. I think it's hilarious. I mean, we read out Sean's comment about the iPhone 14, the Queen Elizabeth edition. So I'm not precious about it. But I do think it's absolutely unbelievable how many people are just filled with the most ugly kind of malice. So we shall see. Congo Chris says, fun fact, Mandela was the only non-royal who referred to her by first name. That's partly true, but not entirely, because the Queen does, there are a few people who've been able to refer to her by first name. Some of them very close friends, even though they weren't necessarily royal. So there are a few, but certainly Nelson Mandela was one of a very, very small circle of people who was able to do that. And she was very fond of him. And I think, for good reason. Here was a man who she could really be herself with, a man whose own achievements meant that he didn't have to defer, and that he didn't have to bow and scrape, and also that he didn't have to feel superior. She knew probably more secrets than any other living person, and not one of them was ever revealed, even by mistake. How many of us could say that about ourselves when someone tells you something in confidence? Just a silly thing, like you find out that one of your friends is cheating and you keep that a secret. Now, imagine at the level of international politics, where there are secrets flying around about things to do with nuclear weapons, to do with wars, invasions, threats to national security. And she kept all of that secret. The only time that a prime minister could really open up was when they had their weekly audience of the Queen. And in that way, I think a lot of English historians have said that constitutional monarchy is quite superior because it allows some steam to be let off between the executive branch of government, in this case, the prime minister, and the head of state, the Queen. Anyway, it's interesting. Here's Congo Chris. Listen, while we're talking about his comment.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. It's me, the guest pest, the warning in the morning, the mayhem of 6 a.m., the undefeated, undisputed, and undeniable heavyweight champion of the comment section, your boy Congo Chris. And I just wanted to say, it's the weekend, baby!
Nice. And indeed it is. Okay, so I'm very sad for Jessie Clegg, says Dealinda Oliveira. Yes, Jessie Clegg, the mother of his child, I'm not sure if they were married or not, died also of cancer. Poor old Jessie, I mean, really has had a rough time of it. His father not so long ago, now the mother of his children, his long time relationship, perhaps wife, I'm not sure what the details were. I didn't know them closely enough. But yes, I saw that yesterday too. So sympathies there. Theron says, can't the monarchy be abolished with her death? I'm not hopeful about that, Charles. And then what? Liz Truss? I mean, is Britain to be represented by Liz Truss? Are we going to sweep everything that anyone in the world likes about Britain? The palace, the soldiers, the pageantry, the history, the extraordinary stories. Are we going to throw all of that in the rubbish bin and condemn it to museums and instead have to listen to Liz Truss or Boris Johnson? Is that what you'd prefer? I'm pretty sure that the people of Britain wouldn't. Anyway, I wonder. Nicely said, yeah, laughter can lighten the mood, but a time for mourning is necessary. Well, if you feel that is necessary, there are going to be supposedly 12 days of mourning. The Queen will be buried on a date 10 days from now, according to what I've read. So that'll be Sunday next week. And she'll lie in state. And I mean, the crowds that already gathered outside Buckingham Palace last night was extraordinary. It was quite something to see. Such sad news, says Sharon. 2 weeks of mourning is a bit much, don't you guys think? Well, you see, some people think it's not enough. Some people think it's too much. I don't know. That's not for me to decide. She was a driver during World War II. She had to tolerate all types of people, and she did for the UK. Long live Boris Johnson, says Congo Chris. Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting that at the moment that the Queen draws her last breath, Charles becomes king, which is what happened last night or yesterday afternoon. He's taken the regnal name of Charles III. He could have probably taken another name. He might have taken his grandfather's name and gone as George VII. But I think he's elected. Everyone knows him as Charles. It would be odd if he suddenly changed his name to George now. And, his reign is unlikely to be even a tiny bit as long as his mother's. He's already 73 years old. So for Charles, he is kind of a space saver for the next generation. He's been the longest in waiting heir apparent to the British throne in history. And everybody's worried about what kind of a person Charles is and what his political beliefs are and, what kinds of things he has done in his life and personally what sort of character he has and all of that stuff. Because people are really stupid. They don't understand that the institution trumps the person in it. There have been awful, god-awful people who've occupied the throne of various countries over the years. And if the institution is greater than the person, which is very much the case in a place like Britain, after 1,000 years of established tradition, it doesn't matter what the character of the person is. Not that I have a problem with King Charles III. I think he's exactly the right kind of person to be a king. He is just enough of a genuflection to the past to be a curiosity, a historical curiosity. He's definitely a child of the 1940s and carries some of his parents' gravitas forward, although not nearly as much. But then obviously that because he hasn't had the time that they have, to do this in terms of being in the role of the king. And everybody seems to think that the rules are just made up on the spot, like their own chaotic lives. This is what happens. People are like, oh, but is he going to abdicate? Doesn't it pass directly to William? Just because all of the rest of the world is in chaos and run by buffoons like Joe Biden doesn't mean that there isn't a script for this. Doesn't mean that over 1,000 years they haven't figured out the best way to smoothly transition from one thing to another. And that is precisely why so many people look to the monarchy as a source of comfort and inspiration, because they know what they're doing. They've been doing it for an exceedingly long time. And people who don't understand that and who live in constant turmoil and chaos imagine that everything in the world is turmoil and chaos and that everyone has absolute agency or that they have none. And in a situation like this, the rules are written down. I wonder how Mrs. Narcissist Markle is going to turn it to be about herself. Oh yeah, you just wait. She's going to pitch up at some point with some terrible attention-seeking effort. She's precisely the kind of person, actually, who would be saying horrible things on the internet if she weren't being held back by a tiny modicum of what remains of her sense of decency. And I don't think there's a lot, but it's enough to stop her from going online and saying terrible things about the Queen. Is it true that Prince Philip has not been buried yet? Yeah, that is true. He's in the Royal Vault at Windsor. He's on a slab under the St. George's Chapel nave, and he's waiting for the Queen to join him, and then they'll both be buried together in a separate royal vault that the Queen's parents are buried in, and Princess Margaret. Have a great weekend, everybody. Off to shoot some babies. Oh, nice. No, not what you think. A client's waters just broke. Oh, well, congratulations. You see, birth and death. Well, I've got my mother's 70th, coincidentally, this weekend. It's ironic. She was born in the year that the Queen became Queen, and she's celebrating 70 years tomorrow. We're having a big party on an old family farm that's been there for 200 years. And we are going to be celebrating her, which I'm excited about. And lots of her friends coming. She's got, well, the ones that she could gather up, who are still around and well enough. And some of the younger people too will be there. But it's quite something, and I know how lucky I am. I know how many people who are listening to this right now wish they still had their mom around or wish they still had their dad around. I'm lucky to have both. And I'm lucky that we can celebrate her this weekend. So we're going to be doing that on Saturday. So I've got a big weekend planned. But it is just about 6:30, and it's time for us to check in with Ben Karpinski, who is newly returned from Australia, where by all evidence that I've gathered on social media, he had the most terrific time. Hey, Ben.
Hey, Gareth. How's it going?
Good. God save the King and Queen Camilla, who I know you're excited about.
Yeah, Camilla's worked really hard for this, so she finally gets her day. She's no doubt going to celebrate with 3 pints of Guinness and at least 2 ice creams down her chin.
Right, exactly. Good for her. So how was your trip? Everybody wants to know.
Yeah, I totally get it. Australia's amazing. It really is in so many different ways. I think Melbourne's probably the greatest city place I've ever been to. There's so much more.
Really? The best city you've ever been to, huh?
Look, I haven't traveled as much as, sorry, I've not come back because I was on that absolute germ vehicle of an aeroplane for about 20 hours. I'm so run down still. Look, I've traveled to 18 countries now. And yeah, Melbourne, I'm a massive history nerd, as you know, and I love sport. And what Melbourne does is it combines amazing history, architecture, and a functioning big city with the greatest sporting city in the whole world. And that They've got
Wow.
the Aussie Open Tennis. They've got their own Grand Prix. They've got the Melbourne Cup, which is one of the biggest horse racing events in the whole world. They've got some of the best golf courses. You really can go on. And what I got to experience first up was AFL, as in Aussie Rules Football. I went to the MCG, which is obviously one of the biggest cricket stadiums in the world, but it's also the cauldron of all AFL. 88,316 people cheering for men in tight clothing throwing this ball around. Yeah, it was like I often reference like Rick and Morty when I discover new things in life, because we all live what feels like in one plane, and then we go like another dimensions. Like that's Australia. Australia is like if South Africa was just kept working basically, and everything and money was reinvested and not stolen. Like it's a really big thing. I know we always joke about it, but if you actually reinvest money into a country, you can have a pretty cool fucking country. Yeah, and that's what I feel they've got. And I know it's so sophisticated. I had no idea Australians were so sophisticated, but everything is just cool. It's not like, you go to a first world country and go, oh, everything just works. It's so cool. There, everything works, and people are genuinely pretty happy. Like they're living cool lives, and they're just doing really cool things, and they've got their own thing on the go. Like, you go to Europe, there's a lot of cuntiness around people. You go to Australia, it's like they've got their own thing. They're happy. They're not smug about it. They just got cool stuff. And it was just endlessly entertaining. Every single day I was discovering new things. And I was there for a long time. And I was working essentially. So I felt like, I was doing like the train commute. I would like have my favorite coffee place that I went to.
Nice. So you actually lived there for a bit. It wasn't just tourism.
It was my lived experience, Gareth. So therefore it counts a lot.
There we go.
And I totally get it. Like I now support the football team. I'm a diehard 3-week-old supporter. We just missed the playoffs, which was obviously very, very tough. But yeah, I literally cannot speak high enough of the place. It's pretty special. And work-wise, it was a tough 2 weeks. Sorry, it was a tough 2 weeks. We're constantly pitching our business match kit. And it was so cool to never ever being close to the smartest person in any room I was there for like 2 weeks. We do live in a bubble here in South Africa in many ways. And in the whole venture capital startup space, there is incredible things happening out there. And there's incredible money to support incredible ideas. You work quite hard in South Africa, not to sound defeatist, but there's a pretty obvious ceiling with a lot of things. I mean, there's obviously opportunity in lots of other areas, but there's also like you have meetings. Halfway through the meeting, you're talking to a moron. There is no money, there is no vision, and they are wanting to see what's in it for them. You have a meeting over there. These people have long-term visions. They have like really good staff components that are very smart and working together. And there is a genuine sort of greater good. Yeah,
I'm really happy. I'm happy to hear that. I mean, we've often said rude and disparaging things about Australia, but we say rude and disparaging things about ourselves. So there is a counterbalance. And we say rude and disparaging things about every other country too. So, it's not like we've created a special place here in this show where we, especially go to the trouble of making nice things happen and saying only the most beautiful things we can about Iran, for example. We're an equal opportunity offender. But I like the fact that there's a bit of experience here from you, someone who I think we trust to give us an honest bit of feedback. So that's great.
Yeah, I mean, look, I could go on for hours. It was such an eye-opening trip. And of course, having not traveled, like the last time I traveled overseas was to go see High Rob in Netherlands. So you really do get into a rut when you don't travel. Even though like I'm a pretty happy guy, I try and make the most every day. When you aren't traveling, when you aren't testing yourself, you really do become quite average. And again, like I'm my harshest critic with everything. But when you have to get out your comfort zone to that extent and realize how humbling it is at the age of 40, and you think like, fuck, what have I actually been doing with my life if this is what's possible and this is what's out there? Like you just look around, I just feel like everyone's rich there. Everyone's got time and they've got like stuff to do. I mean, everyone's got problems, I get that. But it's not a pressureful society, They all got their own thing on the go, but they've also got so many options and they're so chilled about stuff. And like My good friend Dennis, who I've always kind of known through podcasting and obviously through social media, like I finally met him as a person. And I mean, the guy's just so interesting. Like he works in renewables. He's quite a big deal in that. But at the same time, he's more of a sports person and sports authority than I would ever be. And that's what I dedicated most of my years to in my 20s and 30s. Like he's just living such a great life, and it's just got so many cool things. He's got great stories, and yeah, I mean, like just meeting people and like yeah, it's I don't want to like paint it like Australia is perfect because I was in Melbourne. If you were to go to Darwin or
Yeah.
other places, it is quite backward and it's quite rough. I went to Brisbane after Melbourne, and Brisbane's a little bit different. It's quite new and shiny. It doesn't quite have the soul, but it's also like a really cool, prosperous big city. You know, they've got the Brisbane River and it's very beautiful, and they've got the Olympics there in 2032. So they've got this huge 10-year growth spurt that's happening right now, and there's just skyscrapers everywhere. It's like, again, it's just like the scale. Like you think you live in a place that's got a little bit of money, and then you realize what's really going on out there. It's absolutely
Yeah.
incredible.
Well, I'm happy to have your firsthand experience here on this because it gives us a little bit more perspective and
also,
context.
Gareth, like, in life, you always want to live with abundance. You never want a scarcity mindset because that's what ultimately puts you in a rut and it makes you quite average. The amount of I'm not saying like Hinge is a snapshot of life, but it's definitely like a portal to what's out there. Fuck, I mean, living here in South Africa and you're on Hinge, you probably swipe across like 30 girls and you might like one of them. Okay, maybe personal preference. I'm a bit weird. I don't know. In Australia, like 7, 8 out of 10, totally. You
Really?
you interact with them. There are so many girls there. Like, and again, maybe I just wish that maybe I'd gone there when I was like 30, because now I'm, as I said, I'm 40. So many girls. Like you go out, like the ratio of girls to guys is just it's crazy. It's actually
Nice.
like it's
Well,
ridiculous.
then that's the place. I mean, it's not too late for you to find an Australian wife.
No, it's not. It's not. But the weird thing is like you start thinking about that kind of stuff. Like, what if I've lived here for 10 years? Maybe I would have wanted kids. You start changing your life because you see what's possible out there. And like, it's a very different world. But like Aussie guys are so aloof because they've just got so many options. Like so many options. In Joburg, there's probably like 2 or 3 girls that people know of who are attractive. There, like I was staying in South Yarra, just off Chapel Street, and it's probably like 3 kilometers of the coolest bars, restaurants, nightclubs, things to do. And in Melbourne, as you can tell by MasterChef, like you cannot open a cuck restaurant. I'm pretty sure there's actually a commission in Melbourne. It's like the
it's
anti-cuck.
famous. It's famous for that. I mean, the restaurants of Melbourne are world famous.
They are so amazing that a really good friend of mine was actually there coincidentally on business, and we wanted to go for dinner on Monday. Like it's a Monday, right? And it's middle of winter. The weather was shit there. It was like Cape Town on a bad day. It was so cold. It was always drizzly and shitty. So I saw it at its worst, and it was still great. So Monday, shitty weather. I phoned like a few places, and the standard response was, "We haven't got a table for you, but maybe we can fit you in at 9:00."
Sure.
And like 9:00 on a Monday, and that's where they might fit you in. There are so many incredible restaurants, and the whole culture is always just being out and going to places because people have money. But like the finest restaurants, the coolest bars, and because they use the city, there's like these really cool places down alleyways. And then where I was in South Yarra, this road is like, if you imagine like Parkhurst, like 4th Avenue, which is like a Joburg. Okay. On a good day, that's what, like 300 meters of things to go see and do. But even then, it's like broken up by like weird interior stores or shitty shops. Chapel Street is basically bars, restaurants, amazing places where you can go and have dates or meet friends for like 3 kilometers. I think it's about 3 kilometers, maybe 2. Wow. But it's everything's high quality. You cannot open a cuck restaurant there. I'm pretty sure you get shamed. They pull you out at the middle of the night. They burn your place. Everything's amazing.
All right, I like it. Let's turn our attention to some other things because I don't want to take up the entire morning with just Australia. So, what else is going on that's piqued your interest over the while? You've been on social media. Have you seen what's been happening? Anything that you thought, wow, this is a cool thing?
Look, I really want to get away from Australia, but another great thing about being there is like I wasn't really on social media much.
Okay.
I was purely focusing on learning about Australia, Australian sports and all that kind of stuff. And it was very liberating in that I felt like a lot smarter. I wasn't going through the usual social media shit. I was, it was such a weird experience again, because you're somewhere completely different, doing different things. And your mind is growing in different ways. When you start focusing on different things, it's amazing how positive you can be as well.
Right. Well, I mean, that's good to hear too, because that's kind of what your mission at the moment is, to kind of, it's self-improvement, right? It's one of the things that you're most interested in.
Yeah,
I think that's
but just on that, I realized as well, like, when you try to do all these things that make you better and younger and stronger, you take them away. Like, I didn't sleep for like 2 weeks. Like, you have terrible jet lag on the way there. And then we got this. So I went there with one of my business partners. So I gave her the nice room of the apartment, but the second room of the apartment was particularly shit. It was like a half room with a single bed, and the single bed had wheels. So I would probably go to bed. I would try to go to bed at like 9, 10. I would wake up every morning at like 1 a.m. and I couldn't get back to sleep for like 10 days. I was just wide awake, and then you're just like a zombie through the whole time. So by the time you rack up the days of not sleeping, not exercising, not eating well, shit, like I look so different. I'm so lethargic now. I mean, look at me. I look about 5 years fucking older.
I don't know. You're getting a lot of compliments from people here. Someone says you're glowing. Thurance says you're glowing. I think Ben found love down under. Well, I mean, would you move there? That's the question. If you were given an all expenses paid ability to just move to Australia tomorrow, would you do it? Is the value of what you've seen so great that you would be happy to abandon all the things you've done here and the connections you've made in this place?
Yeah, this is the annoying thing about being South African and traveling, is that the first thing you always think about is like, can I live here? I could live in Melbourne. I could definitely live in Melbourne. It's a very simple answer. It's a place where, like, for this business that we're creating, it's the future. I mean, we can maybe push some paper around here, but if we want to make a big impact, we've got to have an office there. So maybe I can do half. I don't know if I could ever leave this place.
Sure.
And I know maybe it's a Stockholm syndrome thing, but you do. This is again like this. It's a really strange thing to try to describe, because on paper you think, well, why the fuck would you want to live in the third world where you wake up like today with no power? But there's something about connections and roots and things that you create. Like, as much as I say I'm reclusive and I am quite socially aloof, like, I would miss you hugely. I would miss certain people that I have day-to-day interactions with. I mean, I'd obviously miss my cats. I was no ways I can make them travel that far. I mean, that plane trip almost broke me. It'll totally kill them. So yeah, I need to.
It is bloody far. I mean, it's really a long way to go.
Fuck. So on the way back, I was meant to fly from Brisbane to Perth to Singapore to Johannesburg.
Mm-hmm.
I had quite a big last night. I kind of went out with a bit of a bang in Brisbane. And maybe I was just a bit slow in the head in the morning, but I missed my flight. I won't go into the intricacies of how slow the Brisbane train is, but I missed my flight, and I spent 3 hours in the call center with Indian men who weren't understanding me. And then eventually, it was just the longest day. And then I eventually somehow got put onto an even better flight, and eventually made it. But you travel for like, shit, it was like 30 hours altogether. Oh man, it breaks you. Like, I was so broken on Sunday night into Monday, still recovering. But yeah, Gareth, I think it's one of those things that I don't want to make sweeping decisions and just think you have to have one or the other. I've got a great base here. I've got a great life here. I've got a good business. I can have a better everything in Australia, but it's I'm not 30 anymore. I know that's not an excuse, but there's also certain things that you look at life differently now. So I do want to open an office in Australia. Absolutely no doubt about that. How much time I would spend there, I need to work out with my partners. And obviously we need to make money, because Australia is fucking expensive. I'm not going there with the ront. Shit, you
No.
won't go very far.
You'll be in big trouble.
No, I need
All right,
I need McDonald's.
Well, that's very interesting. We got Gord coming in a little bit later on, so he's got lots of stories from Europe. So this morning is like a travel edition, I reckon. Congo Chris says, "Take me with Ben. We will father an entire generation of Melbournians between us."
Well, Congo Chris, they don't need it here. They've got good enough people there. As much as we are amazing, and our offspring would be delightful, they've got more than enough.
Michael says, "I've been in Switzerland for 10 years now and still have Stockholm syndrome for South Africa." Yeah, I mean, it's good to hear this point of view, and especially from someone whose opinion I can actually value, because there are a lot of people who talk a lot of smack about things, and a lot of very stupid people have told me what they think of Australia, and a lot of smart people who I didn't really know that well told me a very different story. And now I have to put this into the mix when I think about it. But good.
Okay, well, look,
Good,
I mean,
good,
it's
good.
like speaking about putting things in the mix. This is my one thing about Australia, which makes me nervous, is that they are incredibly woke, as in they are institutionally woke. I get it, because in order for a society like theirs to function, they've got this greater good thing, and they all stand together and do stuff. But that, as we saw during COVID, can backfire into an absolute disaster. You make one decision, everyone's on board. If it's a bad decision, well, you're all fucked for a while. Whereas
Right.
here, things are thought about, and there's different ways of thinking, and there's different ways of actions. Whereas there, it's almost like it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. When you get a system that works together, loads of amazing things happen. Probably more amazing than bad. But that wokeness is just such a cancer in my mind. Like, again, going back to Hinge, 99% of the girls there had pronouns, and I just cannot take that seriously. People are very into that kind of stuff there. They're very into being overly inclusive, and I'm all for, but inclusivity is a very important thing, but it's like it's really, really hypercharged there. And the reason I say I have a problem with that is because here in South Africa, I think we're further down the line. We've taken wokeness to another level. We've been inclusive, and there's also been pitfalls to that inclusivity. And people always think that there is never going to be a pitfall or a downside to inclusivity, but there really is. Sometimes you take your eye off what the main goals are in life.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, like as a white middle-aged man, you can't have this conversation with people because they want to shut you down because they think you're wrong. But we've seen in this country how it can be taken to a level where nobody wins. Absolutely nobody wins. And we all know going woke makes you go broke. So that would be my only issue. And when you're over there, you don't have the ability to be like, Cliff Central Friday morning. Let's have a chat.
Hell no. But you don't even really have that here in some ways. I mean, you have to determine that that's your place and you're going to do what you want anyway. Take the risks.
Yeah,
which is
true.
so
And look,
I mean, there are Australian broadcasters who I listen to who are more kind of right wing than anything we've got in South Africa, and they're very popular and they do a good job. But in cities like Melbourne, hope in hell, like it's totally works. It's like Vancouver in Canada, or Seattle in Washington State.
And that's the thing. If you want the nice restaurants and bars and places where the girl to guy ratio is really high,
you got to go to workplaces. You have to.
You're gonna have to play by a little different song sheet, unfortunately. Not that I'm a big I can't adapt. It's just that kind of stuff is tiring for me because it's not sincere. And I know this for a fact. Like, people do this because they want to be popular. Businesses do this because they want to do the right thing. They don't have any deep set ideology or principles around this, and I can see through that, and we've seen through that for years. So that's my big issue here. My issue isn't the inclusivity kind of angle. It's the lack of sincerity, and I'm just really big on sincerity. That's all.
Right. Okay. I'm happy about that. That's some excellent feedback. I don't know if you've been paying any attention to this at all, but Meghan Markle hasn't been getting any headlines while the Queen's been dying, so she's very upset about that. But apparently Prince Harry arrived last night, long after the Queen had died, and was like, "Oh, sorry, did I miss something?"
So apparently Meghan's got a podcast. I got a message on Instagram earlier.
Yeah, we talked about this on Wednesday because Ryan and who else was it? Ryan listened to it, and I think somebody else on the show with us was listening to. Oh yes, it was Candace Mama. They listened to it and they said it's the most unbelievably shit thing they've ever heard in their life.
Which is what I was going to think it would be.
Yeah, it's just like me the whole time. And I always, I try to think about these things with a bird's eye view, because I do really dislike Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. But when I look at things from a little bit further away, and I think, well, that doesn't matter, because in 100 years' time, no one's going to really think about their personalities. It's going to be, whether or not they change the world in a positive or negative direction. And maybe Meghan Markle isn't so offensive to me because she's an offensive, horrible person, but maybe because she's representative of a certain kind of person that is, I hate to say it, but it may be true, in the majority in the world today. The kind of person who's totally interested in themselves all the time. There's no sense of doing anything for anyone else. There's no sense of being, concerned for the greater good, duty, commitment, integrity. None of those things are important to people like Meghan Markle. And again, I'm not saying just her. She represents a bunch of things about kind of modern people in first world countries, especially, and the way they think about the world. And maybe that's why I get rubbed up the wrong way by people like her and Prince Harry. I don't know what it is. There's a lot of that. There was someone posted a thing of Meghan Markle and Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, and some other people who are like, they're like celebrities mixed with politicians, mixed with actors, actresses. It's this very cheap version of kind of what people look up to these days. And I find it really off-putting, but a lot of people don't, because they see themselves in it.
Yeah, but it goes back to what I'm saying. There's a lack of sincerity with those people, right? I wouldn't trust either of those people, even if they told me that the sun is shining today. Those people aren't to be trusted. And I think that's what also gets you, and it gets me, because you look at them, you don't think they're adding anything to society. It's like they're portraying what they feel is what society should be, and it's not sincere. People are going to forget about them very quickly because they never really had much of an impact. It's like Beyonce's songs.
Yeah. Well, I've been saying that for 15 years now, and she's still here and she's still putting out music. I mean, she's got a team of, 35 people who sit around in a circle and try to write a song for her. And usually the lyrics are just a repetition of one line, but it works because maybe the audience is dumb enough to just eat it up,
Well, of course it is. Of course it is. People still queue for cronuts and, taking pictures of bagels and stuff. There is the thing of supply and demand, and people do demand very average things because they live very average lives.
But then do you think the fault might be with us because we're looking for something? We're looking to see other people reflect the things that we think are valuable, but actually the world loves a Beyonce song and they think Meghan Markle's a perfect princess. Maybe that's what they like.
I just think that when given the attention, these things stick around. Why do you think that the crazy, loony, fucking batshit crazy left are still around? It's because people keep talking about them. Like, oh, do you see what this person said? Or can you believe that they want to do this? If no one gave a shit about them, same as the EFF, if no one gave a shit about them and these stupid news networks weren't always like reporting what they say, they wouldn't be around. People would move on. If you fan the flame, the flame shall burn.
But it's also supply and demand, right? I mean, there never used to be much demand for the kind of self-serving bullshit that we see in, so many people who are in the media, and even in sport, Ben. I mean, this. I saw this Kyrgios guy smashing his racket to pieces, 2 rackets that he absolutely destroyed on the court yesterday. It was all over the news. And I thought, John McEnroe got into trouble for a lot less back in the 80s, and he was regarded as like the devil when he walked onto the tennis court. Yeah. And yet, I mean, if you've ever listened to an interview with John McEnroe, and I've heard him talk a couple of times, he's actually a tremendously placid, like, hippie, and he always has been.
Yeah,
he's a really nice guy, the kind of guy who you think you'd get along with immediately. And I don't know whether maybe I'm just getting old, and that's also some realization. as you get older, you tend to be less impressed with like people who have tantrums and perform, and you're more impressed with people who can actually contain themselves, bite their lip, and do the right thing, regardless of how they feel. When you're young, someone's emotions on full display immediately captivates you because you think, oh, that's so great. They're able to just be themselves, express themselves. You love the fact that someone has just raw emotion, right? It's why, it's why girls like to watch romance movies. It's why guys like to watch action movies. It's like we love revenge movies, all of us, because it draws on that emotion. It's why we also like to fall in and out of love, and we think it's the most important thing we've ever done. It's like we get really angry when we see someone say something that we don't appreciate or agree with or enjoy. And then later on in life, you don't respect that stuff at all. You go to completely the opposite side, and you're like, the person who can actually maintain their composure instead of become emotional is the person that you should look up to. That's a weird contradiction in terms that I'm still dealing with.
It is a bit, but you become critical through experience because the things that you found were amazing, you tire of them because you see a better way. And like when people say, "Oh, you're such an old man," I take that as a compliment. It means that I've evolved from being so base in how I look at things and how I react to things. Like this is all those cliches coming back to kind of make sense, Gareth. Is that you do become more critical as you get older because you just know more.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost as if the whole story of humanity is written into each of our lives, right? Now I'm getting very philosophical, but if you took early man, early man would just like, if his wife pissed him off, he'd just hit her in the face, or knock her out, punch her lights out. Early man would just, if he wanted to have sex, would just rape. Early man, if he wanted to eat, would just club something on the head and then just start gnawing on its raw flesh. Early man was just a pure instinct and emotion creature. And modern man is supposed to be highly intellectual, very sophisticated, tool making, innovative, thinking more of the future than the past or the present. And that's maybe what happens in our own lives is we slowly go from being early man, when we're kids, it's uncontroversial to say that kids are just driven by instinct and emotion. That's clear to anyone who's ever seen a kid. And then you learn to become civilized. And I just look around the world today and I see a lot of people who are actually not particularly civilized. Like they really, and you could see it in the way they behave on social media because this wasn't available. So just as we can use social media for good, you can also use it to really very quickly judge whether someone is the kind of person who you deserve or should deserve your time and effort, whether you should spend any time and effort on them, because they reveal themselves immediately, right? It's instantaneous. So if you read someone's tweet or you see someone's Instagram post and it's just them taking a picture of their own ass or whatever, you kind of know what you're dealing with. And in that way, it's helped us to cut and separate the wheat from the chaff very, very quickly. So again, without sounding like a grumpy old man, like I actually think social media is terrific because dumb, emotional, instinctive people will reveal themselves to their detriment on social media. And the people who actually hold back and probably don't say anything at all, which for someone like me is very difficult to do because my job is to say what I think. And those people who do that and who get it right in ways that I never could, those are the most respectable people imaginable. And I see it with the Queen. She died yesterday, and now you see all these people coming out of the woodwork saying, "Oh, she was terrific. She led for 70 years. She was a stable tent peg around which the whole world could spin. She had this incredible institutional capital, this value as a mainstay of society, of politics, of all kinds of things." And then you get other people who just say, "Oh, well, oh, Lizzie's dead. Well, fuck Lizzie. I never liked her anyway. She never gave me a cup of tea in Buckingham Palace Gardens." Or worse, and there's lots worse on the internet as well. By the way, I see the top trending topic in South Africa is Satan at the moment. You want to guess why?
I know.
Hazard a guess why Satan might be the top trending topic in South Africa. Talk about base and instinctive and emotional.
Because load shedding's back?
No, that would be a good reason. I think we'd all be calling on Satan if it was just load shedding. No, it's the Queen. It seems Black Twitter, which has always been a repository of great value, is dancing a jig about how excited they are that the Queen will be joining Satan in hell. So that's their opinion of the Queen, which is cool. I mean, it's hilarious. You just do yourself a favor. If you feel like a laugh today, then go on and see that. It's kind of fun. I mean, I've long ago stopped expecting anything from Black Twitter except the exact opposite of what is useful and interesting and thoughtful. And therefore, I now look at it as a source of entertainment. Like I was just saying just now, people reveal themselves. And it's not just Black Twitter, but it's all over the world. You got people in America and everywhere else they really are just like filled with ugliness. And if it wasn't the Queen, it would be something else. They'd be angry with someone this morning, no matter what had happened in the news. It could be politics, it could be money, it could be health, it could be relationships. There's always going to be something for those people to be angry about. They can't wait in the morning to wake up and be cross, which is crazy. I mean, I'm genuinely excited about this weekend. I was saying my mom is celebrating 70 years this weekend, which is cool.
Yeah. Very nice.
That's 70 years is a long time, huh?
Yeah, I know. Because in this year of 2022, both my parents turned 70 as well. We're doing like a big thing in November for both of them.
Nice. There we go. Okay. David says, do you remember the power bracelet? That made it easy to spot cretins. I remember that.
Oh, those were amazing.
That was great, huh?
Yeah, that was a really great model.
It is 7:00. We're going to get back with Gord Laws for the first time in ages in just a short while. Stick around for that and a whole lot more. CliffCentral.com, Friday morning.
This week on the Auto Trader podcast.
Belgian Grand Prix has happened. I don't think there's any way of getting through this episode without talking about the insanity that was Spa.
I'm more and more of the opinion that Verstappen deserves this championship.
For sure. 9 wins.
Like 9 wins, besides the 9 wins.
And that drive that he did was
like
just
coming from
clutch.
The back.
Yep.
He just really dominated that race. Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
It's the decade that just won't go away, mainly because we won't let it. It's That 80s Show, the show that taste forgot. Every Friday, Paolo and Dory remember the 80s. movies, music, fashion, wham, beachies, and the Hoff. If it was acceptable in the 80s, it will get you cancelled today. That 80s Show. New episode every Friday, live or as a podcast on cliffcentral.com.
It is all happening this Friday morning on cliffcentral.com. We have Ben back from Australia and Gord back from Europe and me back from almost dying of whatever I had on Wednesday and Thursday. But I'm alive, and so are they, and here they are. Look at them. Hello, you resplendently glorious human beings. Gordo?
What's up, my dudes? How's it looking?
The fuck is going on in your background?
I have moved. And not moved in the sense that it's a remarkable thing like it would have been on the show 2 or 3 years ago. Moved as in moved house. And it is utter chaos. Moving is one of the most traumatic things you can do.
I'm with Ben. It looks like you stole a TV.
That looks like your average chav's lounge. They just come home, they found a TV in the back of a truck, and now.
What did you learn in
Manchester? When I unwrap it.
Hey about God, did you learn to steal a TV? Is that what you learned to do in Manchester?
Moving is the absolute pit, and I try to throw money at it. Like, if you guys ever see a social media post of like me carrying boxes and shit, you must just offer to help, because it means I'm too proud to say that I'm like utterly on the bones of my ass. I will sell the shit that I have to prevent having to move it myself. So even with movers doing the packing and the whole story, you still have to like unpack boxes, and my TV is all wrapped in bubble wrap. I don't even have a place to sit. Like, my desk is over there.
You know what? At least you're not one of those friends who calls you up when they need to move and says, "Hey, do you mind if we use your bucky, or do you mind if you could come and help me move shit from here to here? Do 17 trips." Because I've been asked to do that once or twice. Of course, I've declined every time. I'm not that kind of friend. Everybody knows that. No, but if I did, and I can get one, and people know that, so they're like, "Oh, can you help?"
No, and I go, "No." You pay professionals. You contribute to the economy. You create work. Right. Like, no disrespect to people who genuinely can't afford it, but it's not like it's the price of a small vehicle. It's just an inconvenient amount of money. But even with that money spent, you still have to like put shit in where it's supposed to go. And the trouble with it is that when everything's piled up in boxes and that, you need to create less space in order to create more. You've got to get these boxes out, and you have to like unpack.
So I heard that you got back from Europe and you hadn't paid your rent, and there was a dead animal in your place, and that's why you've been kicked out. Is that not true?
I mean, I wouldn't call her an animal, dude. That's like, this is a human being, for God's sake. No, I had my stuff in storage, and I had to organize a new place while I was away, and it's been an adventure. It's been fun. Moving sucks, but I mean, you just got to do it. So sorry about the bubble wrapped TV.
That's all right. It's okay.
Sorry, Gordon. I just want to get brought up to speed because I think I've missed episode 3 and 4 of your life. You're back from Europe. You're back in Cape Town. You're now going to be living in Cape Town.
Yeah, for the next who knows how long, 6 or 7 months. We'll see after that.
There needs to be wrap-ups. Last time with Gord, and then we get the list.
Yeah, we need a previously on the Gord Laws show. Yeah,
previously on the Gord Laws show. Gord was hating Manchester and thinking of ways to burn it down. He then went to Holland and dealt with the Zuckerberg people and their complete lack of sense of humor. I was after Holland. I went to Greece.
You didn't like Holland? Holland is great.
I love Holland. It's the Dutch are incredibly strange people.
No, they are very much friendlier than some of the people you'll meet in Europe. Come on.
No, they're fucking weird.
The Dutch have got this thing where they smile at you and tell you to fuck off. So they'll be like, "Hello, I'm not really enjoying this conversation with you. I'd like to get back to work and stop talking. So I'm going to go now. Have a nice day." And you're like, "Okay, great. Yeah. Okay. I don't really like you, so we're not going to carry on talking, but thanks and have a good time." Right.
And the Germans?
Yeah, Germany was cool. I mean, I was there for quite a long time. I was there for 6 weeks. I was mostly in Stuttgart, which is quite a quiet, sleepy part of Germany. I also went to Berlin and Frankfurt and Oberhausen and Heidelberg for little visits. And so it was very cool. Germany is kind of like, it seems like there's not a lot of exciting stuff happening there to keep the people interested. They have this like, everything works, everything's clean, everyone's pretty much nice. We'll just mission around and not really pay too much attention. Like, I don't know, they feel like they need a little bit of excitement in their life. It's a little bit 7 out of 10 all the time.
They're a bit like the talented creative kid who gets put on Ritalin, and now everything's kind of mediocre instead of being exciting or terrifying. There's no extremes there. It's all very much contained.
Look, I liked it a lot.
Germans have always been like that.
I mean, a lot.
I mean, even after World War II, if you'd encountered a German who'd really lost everything and was like rummaging through the rubble of, Cologne, trying to patch together a life where everyone in their lives was dead and they had nothing, and they would go, yeah, everything is fine. Yeah, don't worry, we will get on with it. They don't like asking for help, much like you when you move.
But I just figure like I would get pretty bored living there. I think it's like, I know that they've got like a lot of fun nightclubs and that sort of thing in Berlin. I didn't go into any of them. I was expecting Berlin to be like super hedonistic. I was expecting like dudes in latex walking another dude down the road and just like gunnage on the streets, like MDMA kiosks selling like, like an oak with MDMA and Brazils in a little stand outside of the coffee place. But it was just like quite a hip place, like London's more subversive in certain places. LA's definitely shittier and more shocking. There's just some nice bars and some nice clubs, and mostly it's just like a rad German city with a bit of like hip Cape Town if everything worked.
So where did you enjoy going the most? And now that you can look back on it was a couple of months. I mean, listen, I gave you credit in your absence the other day and said it is a very enviable thing for someone like me who I need a base of operations. I need a place to call home. I do not like traveling forever. And my favorite part of a trip is coming home. And I know Ben's just been on a great trip to Australia too. So this is probably the worst thing I can say to either of you. You think I'm insane. But you went, you decided, fuck this, I'm going to take a trip. I'm going to go for as long as I want. I'm going to travel around Europe. I'm going to see a bunch of people I want to see there. I'm going to do some work while I'm there. It was an extended time, dude, and you really seem to have had a very, very interesting time.
Yeah, it was an opportunity that kind of came around out of circumstance, and some of them kind of that you might not be able to line up again. I wasn't sure if I was how long I was going to stay in Cape Town or stay in the country. I've always had ideas of living overseas just because it's something I've always wanted to do. Not like, I'm not one of these like, fuck this place, fleeing South Africa types. I just really enjoy Europe and especially the UK. So the place I was in, the lease was running out. I kind of thought, shit, if I'm going to like, emigrating is a sudden and drastic move, I need to give that a bit more thought. And I don't really have enough time. The place I was in had some issues with it that I was keen for the landlord to sort out. Nothing like myth. I just was like, look, if you get rid of these ugly carpets and sort out one or two things, I'll pay a bit more rent and stay. He wasn't keen. So suddenly I can't see anyone other than myself. So so I just, I thought I'm going to have to move. And again, moving is something I throw money at, even if I'm moving to the place next door, which I tried to do in Joburg once, but failed, and that's a different story. So I had to move from C Point to C Point doesn't cost a whole lot less than moving from C Point to storage to C Point. So I thought,
listen, this is the most dreary part of the Gord show. I wanted to know whether you got laid or not, because Ben and I were fairly convinced you were actually running away from responsibilities, that you'd fathered some children here and you were trying to get away.
Oh, right. Yeah, look, I mean, that's a pretty drastic way. I would just probably like...
How old are the kids now, Gord? How old are the kids?
I don't know yet, actually. So no, it wasn't anything like that. I just thought, let me go, and I've got a remote job, so if I've got internet, I can do it, and I've got some friends to stay with, which would account for about half the time, and then pay. So I paid for accommodation, small places, some of them with kitchens, some of them without, over the course of 4 months, for half of the time I was with friends, and for half of the time I was in little Airbnbs and hotels, and it still cost me 3 times what it costs to live in Cape Town. So by that maths, it would be 6 times the price because I was half the time paying.
That's insane. When you put it like that, then it's suddenly, we really, I often say, and this goes to what Ben was saying in the first half hour, or the second half hour this morning about Australia, and he loved Melbourne, and we're not going to go over that again. But if you didn't hear it for any reason, go and listen to that half hour. He gave a pretty good synopsis of what he thought of Melbourne, and he thinks it's an absolute gem. It's a world-class city. It's amazing. There are things there that just you can't find in South Africa. But to bring a bit of balance to the discussion, I've often said, and I've had it proven by people who have more experience of living in various places than I do, that we really, for our buck in South Africa, you get to have a quality of living, if you're a middle-class South African, that you wouldn't be able to achieve anywhere in Europe or the UK or in Australia or in America.
Yeah, it's expensive. I mean, it really is. Yeah, like you have to be earning the currency, obviously, and then it becomes relative. Sure, I get that. That's just basic economics.
Yeah, I mean, for me, accommodation was the big thing, and not so much the price of food, although there is that. It's like some things are like double, triple, or quadruple what they cost here. But I mean, if you buy the right stuff, you could get away with sort of 110 to 150% the cost for food. But meat, first of all, it's shitty in Europe, and secondly, it's really expensive. I've come to realize that cows is part of what makes home home. And what I don't understand as well, no one could explain this to me, including some like German people and some expats that have lived there for a long time, is why you drive across the border from Holland to Germany, and meat and beef rather goes from double what it costs here to 5 times what it costs here. Is there a special tax on cows in Germany? Are they not allowed? Also, meat is always really lean. And without going into boring shit about my diet, I like fatty meat. And when I say fatty, I mean, here you can get ridiculous. You can get a steak that's 3/4 fat, and it's got an edge of meat on it. But they starve the animal to death. They put it in the field. They wait for it to starve, and then they hack what's left off and put it in the supermarket. But like Germany, beef is like 5 times what it costs here, and everywhere else it's like 2 to 3 times what it costs here. And this scrawl little minute steak that like isn't nice. Like lamb is like it's just nothing has fat on it.
Nobody's doing any doctorates in anything useful anymore. But I wonder if someone would do a proper research study on how a complete lack of meat in the diet turns people into milksops and weaklings, and whether or not that has an effect on their voting, whether they can, it's sort of like, for example, people with mental health issues usually vote on the left of the political spectrum. So, a lot of deeply unhappy, bipolar, crazy, depressed, anxious, that kind of, all those people who have, real serious and concerning mental issues, they usually vote to the left. I wonder if people, when they stop eating meat and they stop using, red blood protein, meat, carnivorous stuff in their diet, they stop eating that stuff like our ancestors used to, whether it slows them down and makes them pathetic. Because I do think like there are a lot of these cities that, where meat is something that people frown upon. And, if you're a vegan, you tell people within the first 5 seconds of meeting them. A lot of those places don't seem to me to produce a lot of warriors or people who have anything resembling.
They chow pigs, dude. Like,
good ideas.
There is meat. It's just all made of pigs. Whereas here, we dismantle cows. Like we have biltong, and it is like the most glorious thing in the whole universe. We have like abundant red meat, but especially like beef and also lamb is readily available. There, it's just pigs. If you like pork, it's Valhalla. Like they do the most incredible shit with pork, all the different sausages and whatever. But like it's hard to find beef. And Germany especially, it's like a lot of stores don't even have it. I bought a steak, and I mean it was a large, beautiful steak. We went to a market, and me and my buddy were like, we're having a steak, and we spent 1,100 rand on 2 steaks. They were probably 500 grams each. They were like nice, and it was like over 1,000 rand, and that was like something that you would get here for in a butchery for like 300 bucks.
You must have been craving that in a big way to have gone and spent like over 1,000 rand for a 500-gram steak. I mean, Ben, you eat a lot of meat, and you found like this one place where they give you a special once a week, but you wouldn't spend 1,000 rand in a week on meat.
No, fuck that. I mean, like, as much as I spoke about how cosmopolitan Melbourne is, like, all I want 4 eggs in the morning. I want some avocado. And then at night, I want a slab of meat. Like, it's really great that there's fusion food and there's 73 different ingredients in this bowl, which looks incredible. But after day 3, I started getting a bit edgy here. Like, I mean, obviously, this comes down to conditioning. It's like you condition yourself to live a certain way. You become used to it, so therefore you like it. We can all adapt and change. But I want to eat steak. I want to eat good steak, and I want to have a braai. I want to be outside. This whole thing of being, it makes a big difference to your mindset. It really does.
I mean, talking about being outside, so I don't know what I picked up on it must have been Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday, because I started feeling absolutely shit by sort of Tuesday afternoon, and then I was literally in bed the whole day Wednesday, which is not like me. If I were even a little bit okay, I would have got on with it and done some things. I canceled all my appointments. Yesterday was pretty useless as well. But I'm feeling much better today. Still got a cough and a whole bunch of stuff. But I was thinking that it obviously, there's a change of seasons going on. So there's a lot of pollen in the air. There's a lot of kind of winter giving you its last sting in the tail. But if you don't go outside and you're not in the sun, I think that makes you weak. Just like not eating any meat at all. I just have a theory about this. I can't prove it yet. I'm not equipped with the research or with the facilities to be able to prove this, but I do think like being in the sun and eating a fair amount of red meat, not too much and not too little.
I don't feel like this is a stretch, Gareth. I'm pretty sure there is research to show these kind of things. I mean,
I'm sure there is.
You need triglycerides, and that you get like fat as opposed to oil. I don't want to get too complicated with it, but a monoglyceride is oil and a triglyceride is fat that your body can use. Now, I'm strongly of the opinion with scientific research that that's the human food source. Most of it comes from animal fats, and you can get some good ones in the vegetable world, like avocados, olives, a few others. You're pretty fucked if you're a vegan. You can eat healthily, and you guys know the whole story with me and losing 130 kilos. I want to make this about that, but like I've seen the results not only with weight but how I feel, and I've also done a lot of research. And I know when you have a viewpoint on something like nutrition or science, whatever, you can find research to back up your opinion. But I mean, I know for a fact that the body utilizes triglycerides. It makes ketones. It's difficult to store them as fats. Very easy to use them as a food source. You don't need to deploy insulin, which fucks a lot of people up. I know how you get with fat folk, Gareth, but like for some of us, insulin is a real problem, and for other people it's easy. Like some people like me can just only eat cheese and be healthy and happy, and other people are very lactose intolerant. So you might have no problem after you've eaten some carbs being normal. I crave like a crack fiend more carbohydrates so the point is fats are good for you, and the best ones and the most readily available ones are in animals. So like, I don't want to get into a political debate with vegetarians and vegans and all that shit. There's also a whole, like, farming a kilo of meat uses more land than 100 kilos of wheat.
I've decided you don't have political debates with vegans. You challenge them to like all out physical confrontation. You just go straight to that. It usually resolves the issue.
Factory farming animals is horrific, and I'm not for it either. But like, if you have a patch of land and you let cows walk around on it, it's good for the land. If you say like having ruminants fucks the planet up, you're like, well, there used to be 100 million buffalo in Africa, and now there's 10. So should we slaughter the ones that are left? They're natural things. Anyway, the point of it is that like, it's a natural diet to eat triglycerides, and if you do a vegan thing, you end up supplementing iron and all kinds of stuff. So to say like, I don't like the way the human being has adapted to eat, I don't enjoy the way we've evolved, it's like me going on and saying, so therefore it's not our diet, therefore we eat plants because I prefer the idea. It's like me going, it would have been fucking cool if we evolved the ability to fly and then climbed up on a building and went nature and jumped off. So if you're doing that in protest to politics, if you're a vegan and you're doing it because of your feelings and because of what you believe, it's admirable. But it's the same as someone going on a hunger strike, or those Catholic dudes that beat themselves. You're doing something harmful to yourself to make a point.
Right.
And like more power to you, but don't then go like, oh, we're plant eaters. We're not.
A quick change of subject here, because I think there's a lot going on in the world today. Obviously, this weekend it's all going to be dominated by the death of the Queen. Do you care about that at all, Gord?
I'm sorry that like a person who was, by all accounts, like a hardworking, like she was a cool. I don't know a huge amount about it, but she was like a really sort of. She queened well, and she did like difficult queening things, and she was there for the people during hard times, and she wasn't like some dumb Twitter celebrity modern royal that like is just rich and famous for a living. So I feel also had a pretty good innings, and I don't, as long as she didn't suffer, it's like any old person that's died, I guess. Sad, but
I just feel sorry for her latter years, because obviously Harry brought shame to the family with Meghan. William couldn't arrest. I mean, William couldn't arrest his hair loss, so he looked very common. Andrew was fucking kids. I mean, like, they were all just letting the side down, and she was holding it together in the years that she should have been really enjoying herself. And that's what really breaks my heart a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's Andrew. I mean, apparently the schools in Scotland are closing, and not because the Queen died, but just because Andrew is in Balmoral. So they're all just closing just as a precaution. It was one of the comments.
Who queens or kings now?
Charles.
Charles Kings.
Charles the Third.
Charles is king. King Charles.
Yeah.
It's a really great day for Spaniels around the world. They're all rejoicing.
I said to my King Charles Cavalier Spaniel yesterday, aren't you excited? It's King Charles time again. It hasn't been since the 1600s. She just looked at me. Obviously, she's a dog.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like an old person has passed away, and the whole world's not going to shut up about it for a while. But it's like it's quite a well-established figure. You can't. I get annoyed when the internet goes nuts about something that doesn't matter and isn't relevant, and just shows that people are very basic and don't have anything else to talk about. But I think you're entitled to a couple of tweets and Instagrams about the Queen. I'm just like, okay, how long is this going to last? Are we going to be queening for 3 days or 3 weeks?
Yeah, okay, but I've got a deeper question on this. So she's head of state, 14 different places. Take Australia, for example. They might maybe want to become more independent. Now that she's gone, in this little gap here, would they become a little bit more determined to become independent? I mean, is it going to start shaping the state of global politics now with her gone? Because Charles, I mean, let's be honest, Charles is a fruitcake. He's like a hyper environmentalist. Please eat the plants. I sniff.
They don't have a huge amount of real influence. Like, I know that it's an important job and there's a lot of figureheading to do, but you can't just like make a law, right? So surely a nutter monarch would be more fun. They can't like launch a nuclear missile, right? So like surely having a complete loon do crazy shit would be more fun than somebody conscientious and responsible and out there doing good.
I think so, and I've always thought that Charles will be a very good king, because he's not terribly interesting. I mean, that's not an insult, but the more boring you are as a monarch, the chances are the better your country does. If you look throughout history, the most boring, long-lived monarchs, the ones who don't really create too many ructions, they don't have too many opinions of their own. I mean, sure, Charles is a bit loopy. He talks to plants and that kind of thing. That's not a dangerous thing. And it's not like he can suddenly pass a law or chop off people's heads if they don't talk to plants. I mean,
you don't want a loon in charge if that loon has...
The question I was asking is that now, are these states going to take Charles seriously, or are they going to become more independent and kind of go their own way? Because the Queen had a lot of clout with her. She had a lot of prestige and heritage and all that kind of stuff. Now, plant talking guy, are they going to go, cool, we've had a good run, but, we're going to take the reins a bit more here? Is that going to happen?
Well, what is likely to happen is absolutely nothing. It'll stay the same, because this is what's been happening in the case of the English monarchy for 1,000 years. Scotland have been weaving in and out of that for at least the last 600. Ireland has had their issues with the royal family, and they've kind of separated out in the last 80 to 120 years. So people will come and people will go. But places like Australia and Canada, I mean, you've got to remember, there's a really interesting book I've got here called Who Owns the World? I mean, that we can joke about the king or queen being completely unimportant in the world today. And they've done a very good job of smoke and mirrors by kind of, they're there to cut ribbons and open parliament and make a speech and host a little pageant and all of that stuff. But actually, and this is a fact which is incontrovertible, I have yet to meet someone who has a good legal argument against this. You know that the Queen, or now King Charles III, actually owns every piece of land in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand, and in Great Britain. Owns it completely. They are the only owners. The King of England now is the only person who can say, this land is mine. He can evict anyone he likes, even if they've paid for that property, even if they paid for it 400 years ago.
This sounds like some horseshit. I'm not saying that you're factually incorrect. I'm saying like as a system, that sounds like some horseshit. Like if the king writes a letter or the queen writes a letter that says you no longer own your place, I'll be like, fuck off, king.
They will be within their rights to have you evicted.
How does
they can use
king or queen of England own every piece of land in Canada?
They do, because Canada was conquered in the name of the British Empire. And Britain, deep down in its bones, isn't a constitutional monarchy. It's a feudal system. It's like if King
Goodwill's
really...
But they're not in charge anymore.
No, they are. Actually, they've just hidden it very well.
Yes, they've got that total nut job, Justin Trudeau, whatever his name is.
Listen, Gord. Justin Trudeau got his job once the Queen gave it to him. He gets elected by the Canadian public, but she had to at the time, sign off on that. It's a very quiet kind of background form of control. Here's where it gets interesting. So you could argue that he won't, now King Charles, won't actually affect his rights to a piece of Canadian land, for example. But if he wanted to, he could. Similarly, if Canada wanted to abolish the monarchy and get rid of them, they'd have to come to some sort of arrangement. And if Charles wanted to, he could insist on being compensated for all the land he's going to lose. And that would bankrupt Canada for the next 500 years.
It feels like Canada could just say no. Who's going to enforce this? I now demand 500 trillion pounds for you guys to be free. And they just go like, well, stick it up your ass, king.
Good. I didn't make the rules. These are just... So lawyers will tell you that in just pure law, there is a way that without anyone even getting close, the most land on earth that has ever been owned by one person is currently owned by the King of England right now. That man owns more land than anyone else, but by leagues. The American government doesn't even come close. I think they're about fourth.
What about McDonald's? I know it's not an individual, but they own quite a lot of land.
They do, but they're far down the list. I mean, it's probably King of England, probably the Vatican after that, because they own churches all over the world and a lot of other property. And then you'll have, absolute monarchies that own all of the territory under their control. Places like Saudi Arabia, where the King of Saudi Arabia owns everything in Saudi Arabia, including the people.
David Benelli says, Gord, your lack of understanding of Commonwealth realm countries is staggering. The monarch of the United Kingdom is essentially the head of state in a realm country. My lack of giving even an iota of a shit is staggering. And I'd like to test you on 80s and 90s thrash metal and then judge you for not knowing enough about it. I don't care. This is not interesting. It's interesting because Gareth's telling me trivia that wow, I didn't know that. But
just to wrap, look, this is something I don't know that a lot of people know this. I read a book a while ago.
Give a shit, but it's interesting when you talk about it because this is some interesting shit. But I don't know this, and who cares?
If you buy property in the UK or in Canada or in Australia, you buy it. You actually pay for the property. You get what is called a freehold or a leasehold. You don't get ownership. Look it up on your contract. If you're listening to us in Canada or in Australia or in Britain right now, or in Scotland or in Northern Ireland, you don't actually own it. You get a freehold, which can last up to 100 years. You get a leasehold. The fact that the British monarchy doesn't come around and claim that territory after 100 years is because they're going to let it slide. It creates too much constitutional friction.
Could they summon the British military to help enforce a land reclaim if they wanted to use half of Canada for a croquet lawn?
the Queen, or now King Charles III, is the absolute head of the military. So even though he's this kind of ridiculous man who talks to plants and cuts ribbons and says, what did you do at public events? He can technically have the entire military do his absolute bidding. And even if Parliament complains, he can dissolve Parliament. I mean, this is something that is possible. This has happened in the past.
I said earlier, like, what's the harm if it's a nut job? They can't like nuke someone for nothing, but they actually could.
Well, yeah, I suppose they could because they're in charge of the military. But it would be very unusual. Let's put it that way. So there's this funny thing that happens, and that's why at the beginning of the show this morning I spoke about this a little bit. But there's this bizarre, uncomfortable tension between hereditary monarchy and constitutional democracy, and it kind of makes Britain work. You know, it makes Britain work. Somehow it's been a very stable country for the last 200 years, and although it's not the empire, the great powerful empire that it was in the 1800s, it's indisputable that people still consider Britain one of the great countries, even though it's, you know, in terms of actual world superpower ratings, you could say that it's slipped right down. But it's amazing.
Yeah, I enjoyed London a lot, man. Like I did a couple of other parts of England that were better and not better, and I really thought Manchester was quite shitty, as we discussed on the previous show. But you mentioned Scotland, like kind of having this uneasy tension, and also Ireland. I really, really, really enjoyed Edinburgh, but I was there in what was technically the middle of summer, and it was like always day, which is kind of nice, but it's weird. And even then, it's like there's patches of the day, like kind of from mid-morning until evening, where you can go around in a T-shirt and possibly shorts. But still, you need like a hoodie with you, because if it gets cold, it gets properly cold, and it rains. So I thought Edinburgh was just beautiful and like such a cool vibe and like a really great place. But I was like, this in winter would be the pits. And the same with Dublin. I've always liked Dublin, but like that weather hates you. Scottish weather is a bit shit, but it does what it's supposed to do. You get the weather report, and it's like it'll be rainy in the morning, sunshine in the afternoon, cloudy in the evening, and it more or less does that. Dublin, it's like by the time you flee inside to get rid of your layers because you've caught fire in the sun, you come back outside and it's freezing again, and it's like God is trying to piss people off. So like the weather there is what ruins it, because you asked which places I really enjoyed. But you know, I've heard things like the Scottish are planning to leave the UK, and there was a referendum and it was close, and then they would apply to join the EU. I have British citizenship because my mum was born in Scotland, and if I then had the choice between an EU, and I know they would not immediately get into the EU, but if they left the UK and then got into the EU and I had to choose between my English passport and an EU Scottish passport, I'd take the EU one. Is that a real thing? Is that actually going to happen? Like possibly, or is it just some bullshit people talk about?
You know, like a lot of this stuff is just theoretical, and if there's enough public pressure on something, it usually can have an effect. I don't know the details. It's just interesting that there are these aspects of, you know, kind of trivia related. For example, today, something very, very ancient and ridiculous happens. A whole bunch of heralds, you know, like the people who used to trumpet at the beginning of like a battle or make public announcements. Go, hear ye, hear ye. It started in ancient Rome. A herald is going to appear on the balcony of St. James's Palace, which is in London. It's not the main palace, but it used to be. And it's in a place called Friary Court in St. James's Palace. There'll be a small crowd of people there. And the herald, which is usually Garter, King of Arms, who wears this funny outfit that is made up of actual pieces of the Queen's coat of arms. So it's, you know, the arms of England. It's like the royal standard. He will stand there with a funny hat on with feathers on it, and he will read from a scroll and announce the death of the Queen and the accession of King Charles III. And he'll announce that, and that's the moment that the king is proclaimed. And Charles will be sitting somewhere, and suddenly we'll have all of these powers and all of these authorities devolve upon him. I mean, it's like the weirdest thing. It's like a bit of ritual. It's interesting to watch, though. It's
how do you get into heralding, right? Like, is this someone whose full-time job is to be like a royal herald, and they do pretty well with it, and they've got like a pension and all the benefits, and they're just standing by ready to herald this moment? Or is it like some dude who has like a different job? He's actually an actuary. He plays golf on the weekend, and he's part of like the Herald Enthusiast Society, and is like waiting for the call up one day, and he's just like, this is a bit of a laugh, like being a Freemason.
No, it's a job. It's a full-time job. He works at a place called the College of Arms. I actually I interviewed this guy about 4 years ago.
I'd be good at that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. He deals with all kinds of arcane things like to coats of arms and styles and titles, and he's the person who's there at the funeral of the Queen. He'll break his staff of office and throw it into the grave with her, and then he has to. There he is. That's Garter, King of Arms. That's what he wears.
That is an outfit of note. I want one of those just to wear it like as a fashion vibe. I would wear one of those out.
Those stockings.
Yep. And the shoes with buckles on them. I mean, it's like, and
is
that
he
was
standing in front of a mirror, or do they just operate in fours where you have to look like that? You have to have that haircut, and you stand bum to bum and march in a sort of
every quarter.
It's
it's like.
It's one guy, but it's a series of photographs that were published of kind of important office bearers in the UK a while ago. But what's cool about this is that there are about 11 or 12 heralds at the moment. So there are 12 people whose full-time job it is to dress up like this and do shit. That's what makes.
So they do other shit than just proclaim the death of the Queen and the jewel of the new king. That has got to go and hear ye, and do some shit like on a regular basis.
They do very interesting shit. They've got a huge library where they keep records of all the, royal families of Europe, and they kind of can trace people's lineage, and they grant people arms, and they.
You need to have arms. You need the royals' permission.
Not these arms, you fucking idiot. The coat of arms. Listen. You know why people have a coat of arms, or used to have a coat of arms? You know why it mattered? Because you could only call yourself a gentleman if you had coat armor, because otherwise you were just a kind of bottom-dwelling peasant. You'd eat rocks and soil.
You were just a min. That is men, but
no, right. You were a serf. You were a peasant. So if you wanted to be called a gentleman,
before the horse, you could only you had to have a coat of arms so you could call yourself a gentleman. So you got one because you wanted to be a gentleman. Like, who decided that? Like, right, you are just men, and you guys are gentle because you have that really cool drawing above on your windowsill. We all should get one.
You couldn't just get it either. You had to, in the old medieval times, you had to be able to afford a horse and weapons and go to war when the king called on you. So then his reward to you was to grant you arms so that you could be identified on the battlefield, and you could then pass those arms down to your children, who would then also be gentlemen instead of peasants.
I've always wanted my own coat of arms, and it would have Blackie Chan on either side, like doing a cat thing, and then on the inside it would have like a piece of cheese, like the little M from Metallica, and a couple of other things that would be super cool. And I would also, I've always wanted like a ring, and I've thought about trying to get this made. I asked about it. It's expensive and difficult, but you have like an actual seal, like the one on the Kellogg's box, like a cartoon seal, and then GL underneath, but in reverse. So I can use it to do a wax stamp, and that would be the official seal of Gord Laws.
That's something a lot of people still do, Gord. It's not such a weird thing. Counts as a signature.
Then you have to get it registered with the herald, and then you have to have a certain amount of ducks and like a horse of a certain size before they'll grant you the right to do it.
Yes, exactly. It's not just for everybody.
Ben, what would be on your coat of arms?
Just like a stake, a sun, and actual arms. Just like one here, one here.
Oh shit! Your coat of arms would have arms. That's pretty cool.
You just have arms, totally. Because then it'd be like, you got to have your goals in life. Your coat of arms should display that.
Well,
and two cats.
On the topic of arms, I follow your socials, and it looks like you are just flexing your tits nonstop. Like you shredded like a wheat biscuit. How's that all going? Are you planning to increase gains, or are you going for leanness? Like, what's your current training objective? Get bigger, cut in time for summer, just performance orientated?
Dude, I haven't done anything for 2 weeks, so I'm like just fellow, I think is the word. No, Gord, I've got an account that basically is that kind of stuff. And I'm not flexing my tits, I promise. I'm just documenting stuff. But right now, I just want to be healthy, bro. Fuck, I really realized like all that kind of other stuff is just noise. No one gives a fuck about it. Just be healthy, strong, and just be happy. And I've really just gone through so many different cycles of what I thought was important or what I thought was cool. No, dude, like just I'm in a much better place because I just want to be healthy.
Well, you look handsome as damn it, dude. Between Gareth's eternal youth from drinking the blood of virgins and your shredded riptitude, I got this like I think I would have visible abs if I didn't have this saggy patch of ball bag skin under the bottom of my stomach. But like between the two of you, I'm like, God damn it, these dudes are handsome and I've got no bloody hair. It's called a signet ring. Yeah,
I found you.
I actually know that the little square ring is called a signet ring. I'm talking about the seal on it.
Look at all those.
I bet you these dudes have never had consensual sex. Like, I mean, that is a nerd gathering of nerds.
I mean, this is the nerdiest thing I've ever actually discovered. Like, those guys make Silicon Valley guys look like frat boys.
Yeah. Now, those dudes are proper nerds. And I mean, good for them for being able to get such a strange and cool job with an outfit like that. But those dudes are either paying for it or not having it, as far as I'm concerned.
But I also reckon guys like that.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
I reckon guys like that are probably the happiest people in the world because they're nothing else in life other than a herald, right? Imagine there's something so designed for your nerdiness and your quirkiness that you can just be that all day. They must be hugely happy.
Yeah. No, they are. I mean, if you're really into history,
into heralding, like, do you need does it have to be a family thing? Do you have to have a coat of arms, enough ducks? Your father has to own a piece of land in a certain shape.
Don't be ridiculous. I thought that might be an interesting job once. And I mean, I didn't pursue it, but it's easy to do. Funnily enough, pursuivant is what you're called before you become a herald. It's like an apprenticeship.
Then you lost your virginity and no longer qualified to be a herald.
Yeah.
Your dreams were dashed.
You ask the question, I'll give you the answer. So you go to the College of Arms and you ask them to enroll you. And then they look at you and they go, well, you know, this person has no experience in this. You haven't got any degrees in this, or maybe you're not interested enough. Maybe you don't know anything, or maybe you're just not the kind of person who they necessarily want in the office. It's like any other job. You apply, and then they'll choose a few people every year. There are still people who want to become heralds. It's amazing. And then if you get to the top of the pile, you get called Garter King of Arms, and you oversee a whole bunch of shit. You're actually tremendously important. Like you'll see a role that he plays now at the coronation, sort of middle of next year. That's going to blow your mind, by the way. I often say to people, a lot of people think that a royal wedding is a big deal. You have no idea. When a coronation, and this is something that doesn't happen very many times in any one lifetime, because there are not that many kings and queens in the world that are still crowned. But this is an absolute tour de force of pageantry and show, and it's incredible, and the amount of stuff that happens there, and ancient things that are resuscitated for the first time. I mean, the chair that King Charles will be crowned on has been kept in Westminster Abbey since 1307. It is a wooden chair with a stone at the bottom of it that was taken from Scotland. It's called the Stone of Scone, which Scottish kings were crowned on for another 500 or 600 years before that even. And there's so much that goes on around this. It's fascinating. I mean, you know that right now, the British national anthem is God Save the King, not God Save the Queen. Changed.
It would make sense to change that because people would think it's a pretty ineffectual. Maybe I was going to make a joke about how the national anthem didn't work, but maybe it did. I mean, if singing, please do not let Gareth die, we'd be sad if Gareth did die. If that could be why, it would keep you alive till you're 145.
Right. Well, I mean, I saw a very funny tweet yesterday. God on Twitter, who's someone who I've interacted with in the past. He sent me his book. The Tweet of God is his Twitter handle, and he said, "I tried to save her, but even God can't save everybody." It was hilarious. So, Gord, there's a Master Herald at Edinburgh Castle. You could have gotten your coat of arms while you were there, you lazy slob, according to Congo Chris.
Also, somebody asked, I've lost the comment now, somebody to do with rock and roll, just Rock Up TV asked, what's the salary like? I mean, are you going to have a holiday home somewhere warm and, investments in pounds if you're a medium to senior herald, or is it
No, it's like
vocational. Is it vocational?
No, it's like a bureaucrat's salary. It's not gonna, you're not gonna pay for millions of things. If you want to do that stuff, I mean, yeah. And the stamps, and coins are going to change too. Obviously, all of that changes now to Charles's face instead of the Queen's.
They changed the face on the coins. Ben, what would your favorite like weird ass job be if you could like do some random and odd shit like heralding? You get paid a lot for it just to do something completely bizarre.
It'd be really cool to change street names. You can change an entire city through names, and you can have like a Metallica district where you literally just put the names of Metallica songs into one area.
I hate to disabuse
they have
you.
Got
of
a
the
road
notion.
in San Francisco.
This is totally possible. And you just have to join the ANC. They're very good at renaming streets, and you can do it right now. You can go and join the ANC right now and be renaming streets by October.
I don't know if it's still there, but somewhere on William Nicol in Joburg for a long time, somewhere around like where the Design Quarter is, one of those intersecting roads, there's a sign that was there for years where William ended in an N. It was like William Nicol Road. My buddy Dale Immerman, who you know, Ben, he pointed it out once and sent me a photo, and I just thought it was the most hysterical thing in the world, William Nicol. What I noticed, though, you mentioned renaming roads and stuff. We don't build statues of people anymore. I love a good statue, especially like in Germany, they're massive on that. Like the top of every building's got like 12 dudes. Just like, this is us, and we're going to stand here and be important. So when dudes went for Statue Day in like the 1600s or the 1700s, they would wear these bizarre outfits, but that's like basically dressing up for a selfie now. So now when there's like a public work or a statue that gets built and approved by the government or the town council or whatever, it's always some abstract shit. And I'm like, the old statues were just somebody like, this is what I looked like when I was doing best. Why don't they build like statues of dudes just doing their life? There should be one of like Eminem just rapping, or like O's on a couch playing PlayStation, because it should reflect what people do now and what stuff looks like now and the fashion.
Let me show you an example. Again, you're ignorant. They have been making statues of people. Here's a great one.
Yes, I know we get a bust of a terrible bust of Cristiano Ronaldo while you're having a bad acid trip. But seriously, like they should, because in hundreds of years, people see it and they go like, wow, the outfits were weird. And like this dude, and they'd be like, Marshall Mathers was a dude that said rhyming things and offended people. And like, that's weird. You know, like dudes sitting in front of a PlayStation playing PlayStation. In 300 years, people will be like, what the fuck are they doing?
Hold on. Like I said to Ben, you can join the ANC and rename streets. You can make a statue tomorrow. You could put up a statue right outside your house in Cape Town.
Sure, like if you were a statue maker, you obviously had like boom times, around Victoria and all that kind of stuff. Then what happened to statue makers? Because they haven't made statues, as Gord said, for like 40, 50 years. You talk about like COVID killing the event industry. Who killed the statue industry? And what are those people doing?
And your outfit, dude. Think about choosing your outfit. Like you see these dudes out there, it's like a 200-year-old, 300-year-old statue, and the oak's got like a floppy hat and like a scepter and big poofy shoulder things with like whatever and like flowing robes and standing there. And you're like, that's the dude on Statue Day. It was like, okay, dress nicely, dress in your best, maybe go get a new outfit at Statue Day. They weren't out looking like that every day unless they were doing some official thing. So if you were going to get your statue of just like Ben, you'd have to think quite hard about what you were going to wear. And some people would screw it up by going like super mainstream fashion, which even in 10 years, let alone 100 years, has aged badly. And you look like, wow, that's a terrible 80s outfit that you wore. Or they'd like try and keep it relatively sort of, classic.
Listen, I'm gonna have to call this to order. We got George Mienie on, and George. Seems to be some feedback.
Sigh. George makes me question so many things, but I'm like,
I'm going to take you off until you figured that out, George. I don't know why, but we're hearing Gord twice, and trust me, once is enough.
Let me just try, see if it happens again. No, it's 1, 2.
And you got feedback.
There we go. All right, now we're good. How you, George?
You know what I did? There's a little tick box on your system called echo cancellation. I ticked that.
Why the hell would you do that? It seems to have made an echo, not cancelled it.
No, I ticked it after you said there was feedback.
So, George, we're talking about statues, and Congo Chris says we should build a statue out of crushed cars. How would you like that? Put it outside Auto Trader.
I think that'd be pretty cool.
What's going on, George?
Yeah. So, do you know why car alarms go off? Have you ever had your car alarm, or any other person's car alarm go off as a result of a loud noise?
Yeah, it happens often in like big parking lots, and then everyone's car alarm goes off. Why is that?
Is that what causes them to go off for just nothing? For just like no reason, the car alarm goes off? Well, but obviously this is the reason, but it seems like there isn't one.
A little known fact that car alarms sensors are more than just motion sensors. People think that car alarms go off because there's a motion sensor inside the car. That's actually not true. There are a range of shock and impact sensors inside the car that make the alarm go off if there's anything that creates vibration, and sound creates vibration. So that's why the car alarm goes off when there's a loud noise.
Okay. So they build these things into them, which is damned annoying, because it means that you have to go through the trauma of an accident or an impact or something, and then you also have to be irritated by the wee that happens afterwards. It's great thinking.
Yes, exactly.
But is that a sound sensor, or is it a motion sensor that gets triggered by a loud enough sound causing motion? Is it supposed to detect a loud noise, or is it a byproduct of the vibration of a loud noise?
I think it's a byproduct of the vibration of a loud noise. It's meant as a shock or impact sensor.
Okay.
That's my opinion. Didn't say that in the research that we did on this.
I'm going to go and shout at cars in parking lots and see if I can make their alarm go off by like just yelling at them. Go with a pot and a pan and be like, "Yeah, this car's alarm sucks. Didn't pick that up at all."
That reminds me, Gareth, and I didn't say hello to Ben. How's it, Ben?
Yeah, good, George.
I thought you, when I saw you this morning, when I tuned into the show, I thought you were like just woken up, because you were so still. You were just sitting there, and Gareth was talking, and you were just still.
He was probably bored. He was probably bored with me. You know, Ben is useless at pretending he gives a shit about something when he really doesn't. He's probably sitting there going, "Oh well, this guy just shut up."
Gareth was going on a bit, but he was just sitting there. I thought you were frozen.
Great.
Talking about, I went to Cape Town this week, and very quickly, I remember I bought that book of Manda the other day.
Leadership book. Yeah.
So I started reading it on the airplane, and I've like got to the second page, and I was like, "This is a shit book. Why the hell am I reading this book?" And I carried on reading, and then I realized that I was actually in the preface. I wasn't in the book yet. And the preface was going on and on and on. There was no value. But then when I got to chapter 1, and then I got to chapter 2, there is actually quite a lot of value in that book, and he brings it out quite early on. So really good book so far.
What's it called again? Leadership. Did you say the book's called Leadership, or it's about leadership?
No, it's called Clarity. It's called Clarity.
Clarity.
Yeah, it's about leadership. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm relieved about that, because otherwise I would have had you and Manda fighting about it. But all right, cool. What else you got for us?
I thought I'd mention very good book. So a car, right? Have you ever had to have a very difficult conversation with somebody? A car turns out to be a very good place to have a difficult conversation.
Because they can't escape?
Well, I think it may be because they can't escape, but confrontation.
And if they start beating the shit out of you, they will also get themselves killed. There's one person in the world who's still alive purely because the shit they gave me was in a car while it was driving. I would have beaten them to death otherwise. And it was like, well, if I do this person's driving, we'll both die, but it might be worth it.
Sure.
Well, I agree with all of that, but confrontation usually means that you've got to face the person. You've got to make eye contact. Human behavior, you make eye contact when you confront. Whereas with a car, you're actually side by side, so it creates less confrontation. So it actually diffuses the conversation a little bit. So that's one good reason why you should have difficult conversations in a car. And then also it can be more productive in a car because your secondary activity is having the conversation. Your primary activity is actually driving. So therefore it further diffuses the confrontation that might occur.
But wouldn't road rage up the ante? I mean, like if I'm arguing with someone and then someone's driving badly in front of me, or someone puts on their brakes
Very
quickly,
good point.
wouldn't that accelerate the problem?
It's not a calm environment. I'm not at my most rational and like at my most sort of discerning when I'm driving around, and assholes are like doing, I'm the only person in the world, everyone else is an NPC in a video game driving, which is most people.
It's funny how people become different personalities when they get behind the wheel of a car. It fascinates me. That's why I drive electric, calms me down. I listen to serene music, and I control my emotions, as Ben was putting it earlier. You know, it's serenity.
All right. Okay, well, interesting. So if you want to have an argument with someone, do it in the car, but not while the car.
Whereas I am the shittest version of myself when I'm driving in any kind of 3.5 or more traffic. Like, I like driving. I enjoy driving cars, but I hate driving. It like makes me a misanthropist that like just wishes for a comet or a nuclear war, because people are just so inconsiderate. I've come to realize that the exact same system of only I exist, I'll do what I want, everyone must get out of my way, exists in public walking places everywhere in the world. But like, everybody's like, I'm only not going to crash into you because I lose points. I'll have admin to do. If I kill you, there might be a court case, not because you might have right of way.
You actually illustrate the point that the problem is people, not cars, because people will do the same
I enjoy
stuff.
driving a car if I have room to actually go and it's a nice car. You know, bumper to bumper traffic, doesn't matter if I'm in a Bugatti or a Rolls Royce, I'm going to hate that. But if I can chuck it around some corners, cars are fun. But people are just, everything that's wrong with humanity is on display in traffic. Everyone's always first all the time because it's me.
No.
Personalities change as you get into the car. So onto a more interesting topic. In England, you've been to England lately, Gord. In England, something bizarre happened. This car thief stole a Mitsubishi ASX, which is an SUV, and it wasn't the stealing of the car that got him caught. He's on the same day that he stole the car, he didn't pay for petrol. He drove off. He didn't pay for petrol when he went to the filling station. So that was the reason the police were looking for him. So the police saw him go into this one house, and they followed him into the house. And when they followed him to the house, started searching the house, couldn't find him. And when they couldn't find him, they suddenly heard the teddy bear in the corner breathing. And he had found this teddy bear, cut a hole in the bottom, and climbed into the teddy bear as a hiding place.
How massive was the teddy bear, or how small was the dude?
Well, there's the teddy bear on the screen that he climbed into. He must have
he climbed in his ass, which, if that, like everything being proportionate, if that asshole of the teddy bear is big enough to get an adult human in, that has got to be a 2-story teddy bear.
It's pretty big.
Well, I mean, if you look at the guy's hand on the top, it kind of gives you a little bit of a reference.
There's a hand, okay.
How big the teddy bear is.
No, that is a big ass teddy bear.
But the teddy bear, if the hand is that big of an adult man, is still not big enough to fit a whole human. He probably put it on his head, and then like the rest of him was out.
Don't know, but this guy hid in the teddy bear but got caught, and the reason was
a hiding place because he got found. So
I agree. It was a really bad hiding place. And then very finally, Gareth, the grill on the front of a car. What is it used for? Traditionally, it's been used for airflow, cooling down the engine inside the car. But it turns out that the grill doesn't have to be this gaping hole in order to cool the car down. You actually only need a couple of slats in order to cool the radiator down behind the grill.
Funny, that's exactly what they said about that teddy bear. It doesn't need to be a big gaping hole. It just needs a couple of slats removed, you know?
Exactly. But it turns out that grills, like tail fins on cars, are actually quite a big feature when it comes to how people select their car.
Okay.
So it looks cool. I always thought it was mostly a design element. Like they need a few holes, so then that gives them a reason to put a little designy thing at the front.
It's definitely a design element. And apparently people are attracted to cars that have grills that are big. Look at the Aston Martin, look at the BMW, the latest BMW. The grill's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But that's actually an aesthetic feature that people are attracted to.
All right, very good. So now we know that that's also just marketing, really. That's all it is. It's another,
except
another aspect of marketing.
When you get to electric cars, you don't need the grill. So at all. You know, in the Tesla, there's no grill.
George, I remember something interesting about the Tesla when I was away, because there were so many of them and you see them every single day. They're actually hugely ugly cars. Like if you see one in isolation, you're like, wow, this is amazing. It's so futuristic. But you see them, they start to look like electric Almiras when you see them all day, every day.
Yeah, it's almost like the Hyundai Elantra, I think it was. You know, when they first came out, they were cool, but then they were everywhere.
Yeah.
And then it becomes like uncool. It's like just another bloody Elantra.
Yeah.
Listen, you lot, we're out of time. Thank you for a lovely Friday morning. Gord, Ben, and I almost said Gorge. George, we will see you next week. Have an excellent week, everybody, and we'll catch up again very soon.
Everybody. Happy weekend.
Friday it up.